Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad you could join us today. I know that educators are very, very busy, and we truly appreciate your participation today. Thanks for joining us. I want to just let you know you're here for Read Naturally Live Basics, and we also have another Read Naturally Live webinar coming up for keeping students challenged. So I believe my colleague Christy is going to put the information in the chat about how you can sign up for those other webinars. But again, let's get started with Read Naturally Live Basics. All right, so some of you may know about Read Live. Read Live is the platform for Read Naturally Live. So if you think of Microsoft being the platform for Word and Excel and Outlook, this is the overarching Read Live platform that we use to present our 4 programs. They're all comprehensive and research-based, and this company is founded by teachers, and many teachers work on the staff here. So this is a proven program that's created by teachers for teachers. And it really helps differentiate for your students who are receiving services through RTI or MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support. And it's a very flexible program that you can use in a lot of different environments. It is cloud-based, so you do need an internet connection, but anywhere there's an internet connection, the students can log in and use the programs in Read Live. Mentioning those programs, there are 4 of them. Read Naturally Live, which focuses on fluency and comprehension, and we do have a phonics series within Read Naturally Live. That'll be our focus today, Read Naturally Live. But there's also Word Warm-Ups Live, which teaches phonemic awareness and phonics and also supports fluency and comprehension. 1 Minute Reader Live is a completely independent program for students to use during silent sustained reading or when the teacher is doing assessments. And so that's a really helpful program for all of your students. And Read Naturally Live Espanol is all of the stories in Read Naturally Live translated into Spanish with Spanish instructions and completely in the Spanish language. So that's helpful for our English language learners. So this is a little bit more information, and you do have a link to the handout in the chat, which has this information as well. And so Read Naturally Live is our focus today, and the levels go all the way from 0.8 all the way to 8.0. So this can be used with any age student from a beginning reader all the way through adults. And Word Warm-Ups Live has 3 levels, goes from 1 syllable to 2 syllable to multisyllabic words. So even older students that need to practice phonics and learn phonics skills can use this program. And then again, I mentioned that this is an independent reading program, 1 Minute Reader Live. It's structured so that the students have the scaffolding in place that they need, but they also can just do it independently without the teacher. You can check in on them, you can get information about how they're doing with 1 Minute Reader Live, but it doesn't require a teacher's presence. And then Read Naturally Live Espanol, as I mentioned, this can build Spanish speakers' fluency in reading Spanish and can support really any student who wants to develop some skills in reading Spanish. So that goes from 1.0 to 5.6. So let's focus in on Read Naturally Live. And again, fluency and phonics, vocabulary, comprehension, and spelling, we know that all of the areas of reading are very, very important for our students. So in Read Naturally Live, students are going to be motivated to read more because they're short nonfiction passages that are really interesting, and there's scaffolding built into the program to ensure the student's success. They're able to read with a high level of accuracy. So we want students reading at a rate appropriate for their age with a high level of accuracy and some expression. We also want to recognize how important vocabulary and comprehension are while we're reading. So we don't want to let go of those. So we have vocabulary, keywords built in, and we have a prediction step and a retell step for comprehension. And I'll be showing this to you later in a demonstration, how you can see how the program works. And students can develop automaticity for decoding, which helps them, especially learning phonics skills at a younger age. And also as students get older, it's important to develop that automaticity. And they work independently most of the time. This is a program that requires the teacher for 2 of the steps, and I'll go over that with you. And then there are also really robust reports that you can get so you can follow the students' data over time. And students really build their confidence. I was in a classroom earlier this week, and the student was starting Read Naturally for the very first time. And he improved his score within 20 minutes of working in the program and just flashed me the huge grin. He was so excited. So I mentioned how important that different areas of reading are. We know that teaching reading doesn't happen in a vacuum. So we have phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension. And even though Read Naturally Live focuses on fluency, it builds in a lot of other areas of reading as well. And I mentioned that we want students reading at that appropriate rate for their age. This is not speed reading. We don't want kids flying through what they're reading. We want them to read it well with a high level of accuracy and some expression, but they don't need to speed read. We don't want them skipping words or flying through the passage. We need to have them read like talking. That's what we explain to the students, and that's going to help them understand the passage better. And this is how we know, because the research tells us if we increase oral reading fluency, we're going to see increased reading comprehension. And really, that's the ultimate goal of reading, is to comprehend and to learn from what you're reading and to enjoy what you're reading. So we know that oral reading fluency is a great way to do that. Now, I mentioned automaticity earlier, and this is an example. Doing this exercise is an example of demonstrating automaticity. So the automaticity theory was put out by LaBerge and Samuels back in the 70s, and it holds true today. And what it talks about is that the brain can only do really one thing at a time. So good readers have to switch back and forth between decoding and comprehending very quickly. So the better they can decode with automaticity, the better they can use their brain to think about what they're reading. They can have more mental energy for that comprehension. So this exercise is pretty fun. So what I'm going to ask you to do, just wherever you are logged in from, is just start at the beginning and read the first 2 rows of these colors. I'm going to pause while you do that. Okay, so that was probably pretty easy for you. Reading is automatic for you. And so if I change the direction and I ask you to tell me the color the word is printed in, the color of the font, instead of reading the word, go ahead and try that. Now, I've done this exercise enough to know that that's usually where things break down. And even though you knew your colors before you knew how to read, your brain automatically wants to read the words. It's very hard to stop your brain from doing that. And that's what automaticity is all about. So this is called the Stroop effect. You can look it up and do this activity with some other teachers at your school if you like, but it really illustrates that it takes more mental energy when you have to stop and think about each word versus just reading automatically. And when we see kids reading automatically and reading with good fluency, we consider at or above the 50th percentile for oral reading fluency norms. So these are curriculum-based norms for grades 1 through 6. And I can show you, let's see, I have a different chart that I can show you quickly. So this is from 2006 and the other is from 2017. But the reason I like to show this one is because you can see across the year, no matter what percentile the student is functioning in, you notice the scores go up. So that's good news that the scores are going up over time. Now let me back up and we'll kind of focus in on 3rd grade. The scores go up. These are just the scores from the 50th percentile, which is our target for our students that are reading below grade level. And so we look at these scores and we say, oh, that's good. They go up. But if we look at the proficient readers that are in the 75th percentile, and then we look at the struggling readers that may be as low as the 25th percentile, we see a stark difference in their oral reading fluency norms. And the big problem is this gap that we see between the proficient readers at the beginning of the year and the struggling readers at the end of the year. And so, deep breath, this means that students have to make more than a year of academic growth within an academic year. They have to accelerate their reading achievement, which is why we have a program that's motivating, exciting, and fun for the students to see their progress over time and to see that they are accelerating their progress. So, what does the non-fluent reader sound like? What do they do when they're reading? Think about that for a minute. Think about sitting down with some of your readers and listening to them read. What are some of those reading behaviors that you might see? Here's some things that came to mind for me. Being very slow with reading, taking a lot of time, maybe not reading very many words, especially sight words or high frequency words might be difficult. Taking each word as an independent word and sounding it out, blowing through punctuation, and making many errors. Even if it doesn't make sense, students often don't even stop to notice that they're making a high number of errors and they just want to get through it because it's frustrating. And so we want to help these non-fluent readers become fluent so they can become more confident and more successful in school. So we know from the National Reading Panel report back in 2000 that we can't just say, go forth and read, because think about it. Your students that are struggling with reading during silent sustained reading, what do? They probably pretend to read, just turn the pages. Even if they're trying to read, compared to a fluent reader who might read 2,000 words in 10 minutes, a struggling reader might only read 500 words. So we know that practicing helps us get better, and our struggling readers are avoiding reading because it's very difficult for them or they simply can't do it. So sometimes they pick up a book that's too challenging for them just so that they can look like they're reading the same thing as everybody else. So, what do we do about that? What we do is we put together these 3 research proven strategies. And this was initially a project that our founder, Candace Einot, did in her classroom, combining teacher modeling, repeated reading, and progress monitoring. And those are such important strategies to use when working on fluency. So, the teacher modeling is the student reading along with a narrator on the computer at a slow enough rate that they can actually start mastering the words in that passage. And then they get an opportunity to repeat that process on their own and read the story for 1 minute timings. When they're in the teacher modeling phase, they read the whole story with the narrator. And then they do 1 minute timings to see their scores progress over time. And then when they see their graph, they really see the growth that they've made and they get very, very excited about that. So it's important that we built this into all the programs in Read Live so that students get the opportunity to benefit from these strategies. And when Candace was doing that original project in her classroom, she started with her special education students, and they were making so much more growth, almost double the amount of growth compared to her Title I students, that she said, let me start it with the Title I students and see if I can get a similar result. And sure enough, she did. The average weekly gain almost doubled for those students. So this is where we saw that it was initially successful. And then in future studies, we have seen a lot of success with the Read Naturally strategy being used in our programs. So let's get a little deeper into Read Naturally Live and how it works. We have, as I mentioned, many levels. So in the sequence series, it goes from 1.0 to 8.0, in the phonics series 0.8 to 2.7, and the idiom series 3.0 to 4.5. And don't worry, if you have students with phonics needs above 3rd grade, then Word Warm-Ups Live can be used in combination with Read Naturally Live. So it can be used again from first grade skills to 8th grade skills, from beginning readers to adults. This is really important. It's important to schedule it for 3 to 5 sessions per week, 30 to 45 minutes per session, because we find with that fidelity of implementation, we see the most progress from our students. So let's look at the series and level options that we have in Read Naturally Live. As I mentioned, we have the sequence that goes in half-year increments until we get up to 6.0, and then they jump a year from 6.0 to 7.0 to 8.0. And then we have the phonics levels, and over here on the side, we have the description of what each level in the phonics series covers in terms of the skills. And then our idiom series, when we have the idiom series, we have 12 stories per level, For sequenced and phonics, we have 24 stories per level, and there's a big focus on vocabulary as students are learning these American idioms like, it's a piece of cake, things like that. So many, many levels, many, many stories so that students can get lots and lots of progress. Again, for students above a third grade reading level that need phonics, they can work in word warm-ups as well. So this is what it looks like when a student is working in the sequence series. We have the student's name, the story title, and this happens to be the read-along step. There's a nice progress bar here, and the number of required read-alongs, which typically is 3, but the student only needs 2. And so it's a nice display, and no student can really tell what level other students are on, and so they feel comfortable that this is their level that works for them. And then as we look at the Spanish translation, we have Spanish translations within the sequence series. And then of course, we also have the Read Naturally Live Espanol. So for Spanish translations, where students might want to preview the story in Spanish before they read it in English, we have that from 1.0 up to 5.6. In the phonics series, the students, instead of the key words being read with a definition and at times a picture, there's a lesson about a particular sound. So this is long A with silent E. And so they start with that phonics lesson before they get into the story itself. And then idioms looks just like the other ones, but have those idioms built in so that students can become familiar with those phrases. Another really nice thing about Read Naturally Live is that it's flexible. It can be done in a regular classroom as a station. It can be in a resource room, a reading lab. If you have a computer lab, a lot of places now just have one-to-one devices. And so students could do it on a Chromebook or an iPad or whatever computer they need to use, they can use with Read Live. And then teacher to student ratio is 1:8. In the phonics series, sometimes I recommend 1:6 because the stories and the lessons and the word lists provide a little bit of extra work for the students to practice those phonics skills. And then scheduling, we've talked about 3 to 5 days a week, 30 to 45 minutes per session. The first thing you need to do after you give students access to Read Live, and I will show you how to do that in the demo, is placing the student to figure out a level, series, and goal. And there are 2 ways to do placement that I'll mention to you and provide some resources about. But we're really trying to find the right fit for the student. And once they're placed, they need to understand how the program works and what their job is, following the steps and doing the steps correctly. So we have a whole set of videos about that. And my colleague Christy is going to put in the chat a link to these videos. And so you can start with the first one and just go through them, and then the students get an opportunity to practice. We also have that written out as a lesson plan for you. So now I'm going to switch out of the PowerPoint and move into the Read Naturally Live demonstration, where I'll go into the program to show you these things I've been talking about. And we'll look at enrolling a student, licensing a student, because they need to be in Read Live, but they also need to be in a program or 2 or 3 or 4 programs. And then adjusting story options. I already talked about the training videos, but I can show you a different way to get to those. The placement test, how the students work through the steps, and where you can find the reports. So now I'll just switch my screen and head over to the login screen for Read Live. It is important to log in as a student if you're a student and a staff member if you're a staff member. I can't tell you the number of times where I have clicked the wrong thing and then I get very confused. So I'm logging in as a staff member. I have my account ID already populated, and then I'm going to put in my user ID. I'm going to log in as a teacher, put in my password, and log in. Now, this is the welcome page, and if you're just getting started with Read Live, you might be interested in the orientation and resources page. If you're experienced with Read Live, you may just want to start working and go to the home page. I'll show you the orientation and resources. And it's a pretty simple startup. You add your students, you place your students, and you prepare your students. So this student setup information is here for you, and the placement information is here for you. Any of these hyperlinks will take you to more information. And so this Read Live Help page has those student training videos I was talking about. The other nice thing to know is that you have a way to navigate by using, I call this a hamburger menu, and you can see all of the options here. But if you go back to the home screen, you can see those same options in what we call tiles, these little rectangles. And they each have a title and then a bulleted description of what you can do in that particular tile. So today, I promised to show you student setup. Here you can add and edit students and you can license them. So let's start there on student setup. And you see two buttons here. You see add student and you see application access. Add student is something I'm going to demonstrate in just a second. Application access isn't part of our demo today, but Christy is going to put in the chat a link to some more information about application access. It's a nice way that you can make changes for multiple students and do that in bulk. So that can be very convenient for you. For our demo today, I'm going to show you a couple of things related to the students in this list. So you see all of the headers here. One that I find very interesting is the RNL license header, because if a student says, I can't log in, it might be because they haven't been licensed yet. So first they need a license and then they need program access. So this particular student, Joe Stone, is listed as unlicensed, not licensed. So he's in the system, all his information is there, but a license is available to him, but it says that he's not licensed. So all I have to do is go to my drop-down menu and say yes. And then if I would like to select a lead teacher, which is optional, but I highly recommend selecting a lead teacher. And the automatic default is that Read Naturally Live and 1 Minute Reader Live are selected for your student. And that's helpful because they can be independent with 1 Minute Reader Live while you're working with other students or placing students with the teacher-led placement. But if you wanted to add Word Warm-Ups Live and or Read Naturally Live Espanol, you can certainly do that. So now he is licensed and he is assigned to the demo teacher as his lead teacher. Very important to save and close. And now if I look across to my license column, I see that Joe is licensed. So great news. And now I'm going to show you how to add a new student. Notice anything with an asterisk is required. So I need to put in a first name. I need to put in a last name. So I'm just going to call this new student. I need to pick a grade level for this student and a school. And then let's see, I can pick a homeroom if I would like to. Sometimes with older students, they have a homeroom. I'm going to skip that because it is not required. I'm going to add the student ID. These need to all be unique. So they must have a unique student user ID and they need to have a password, but that does not need to be unique. So it's important to know that. You could reuse passwords. I don't necessarily recommend that, but it is something that is possible. So now that the password's in there, I can decide if I'm going to license this student, which I would like to do, and then I can select my lead teacher. And again, the automatic default is that these two programs, Read Naturally Live and 1 Minute Reader Live, will be selected. So now new student is ready to go. And then I clicked save and add another. If I want to do multiple students in a row, I can do that, but I'm going to choose not to. So now new student shows up in the list and is licensed. And so now that I have new student in the system, I can actually place that student. And there are a couple of ways that I can get to placement. So if I go to the student activity tile, and if you used Read Naturally Live last year and you're using it again, you'll notice this is a brand new tile. So this is where we've consolidated the information for the 4 programs for your students in one place. So if I go to the student activity tile and I click on it, there are a lot of things that I can do. um, and so there's application specific actions where I can change the story options. I mentioned that would be part of the demo. You do have to have a student selected in order to change those story options. So if I look at Melissa Powell, I can see all the different steps of Read Naturally Live, and I can turn some of the steps on and off. Some of the steps I can change the amount of time, and some of the steps I can change the number of requirements. Now, she's my demonstration student, so she has 0 required read-alongs. However, I wouldn't recommend that. It's just because she's a demonstration student and it helps the demonstration go smoothly. So this is where you can make that differentiation happen for your students, and you can really tailor the program to them. And so that's what application specific actions can do. And then if you take a look, each student has a little caret next to their name, which expands the information that you can see about that student. So I can log in as Melissa. I can see when she last logged in. I can also expand these menus to see more information about what step she's on, what story she's on, what her level and goal is, and when she last logged in. So lots of great ways to learn about your students and see what they're doing. I mentioned reports earlier, and this is a place that you can get the story details report, the fluency graph, comprehension graph, and retail graph. All of those reports are available here. And so it's just a one-stop shop for all of your information about your students. Now, I added that new student, and because the student hasn't been placed yet, I have a placement button here that I can use for the student. So that's one way you can get into placement. And then there's another way you can get into placement, which I can show you in just a moment as well. So this is an option to just through the staff module, click placement and have that student placed through either teacher-led placement or student-led placement. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's find the other way to place a student. So I'm going to go back to I'm going to log out as a teacher, and I'm going to go back and log in as a student. And so this student is my new student. And I'm going to put their user ID and their password in here. It's really important that I remember what the passwords are. Okay, so now I'm logged in as the new student. And so the student and the teacher would be here together if they're doing teacher-led placement. And I believe that Christy's going to put some information in the chat about the 2 different ways to do placement. I'll show you in just a second. So Read Naturally Live, because the student has never logged in before, they're prompted to conduct placement.
Before you can work in Read Naturally Live, we need to find a good level and story goal for you. Click Yes if your teacher is with you at your computer now. Click No if you're working by yourself.
Okay, so for teacher-conducted placement, the student would click yes. For student-conducted placement, they would say no. And when they do student-independent placement, the software has a built-in voice recognition system. And so the student has to read into a microphone, and then the errors are calculated using AI, and then the students are placed according to their score. With the teacher-led placement, which is what I'm going to demonstrate now, it's the same process, but the teacher is keeping track of how many words were read correctly and how many words were read incorrectly. So if I log in as my teacher name now, here we go, put that password in there and log in. The first thing I see are the directions for placement, and I'm going to walk you through this. And so this is these are all the details you need to know about placement. And then we have a level to test or series available at that level. So let's say for this 3rd grader, I think he's about a year behind from doing other diagnostic tests, working with the student. I think independently, he might be reading at a 2.0 or instructionally at a 2.0. And I can use my best guess, and the students might read 2 or 3 stories before we find the right fit, and that's okay. So it's going to take about, I would say, 5 minutes per student to do teacher conducted placement. If you click on the information button, you'll see what's available at that level. So at that level, it's 2.0, and then we also have 1.8 and 1.8A and 1.8B. There's nothing in the idiom series at this particular level. So let's just go ahead with 2.0. And then we go ahead and start the timing. And then the student would be reading, and any mistakes that they make, the teacher needs to keep track, because when you see a box like this, that means that the teacher is going to be entering in the number of errors that the student made. So we'll let this timing tick down, and we'll get ready to click on the last word read and enter those errors. And that is how we'll find out if this is the right fit. There's a placement table that you can find on our website that shows what range of words correct per minute is appropriate for each grade level. And that's built into the software so that the program can analyze it for you, and you don't have to do all that math, as I say. But when we work in placement, again, the students need to know it's okay if they make mistakes. We don't expect them to be perfect, and they just need to do the best they can. If they get really stuck on a word, you can give them the word and just count that as an error.
Click on the last word you read when the bell sounded.
All right, so the student read up to the word people. They only made 1 error, giving them a score of 39. Let's see if it's a good fit. And the program says, oh, it's within their placement range, so you can stop and choose out of these levels. If you think the student needs practice with blends and digraphs, you can put them in one of the phonics levels, or if you think the sequence level is going to be the best fit, you can select that. So we'll select 2.0, and the computer has calculated the story goal of 65. And that's about 30 above the cold score for that student. All right, so this is all the information that will be saved for the student in the program, so that when they log in, they'll know exactly what level, exactly what their goal is.
Please select a story.
All right, so that is placement in a nutshell, and the student could watch those training videos before starting working in the story, so they know exactly what to do. And I'm going to show you a different student. I'm going to log out of this student and show you a different student who's already working in the program. All right, put in her password, and we'll get started with Melissa. All right, Melissa has access to 2 programs, Read Naturally Live and 1 Minute Reader Live. We're going to work in Read Naturally Live today.
Please select a story.
I mentioned that she's in 2 programs. She can use this hamburger menu to switch from Read Naturally Live to 1 Minute Reader Live according to her schedule and her teacher's directions. This is the select a story screen. You can see that she's already passed 1 story, The Lake That Disappeared, and she has all these stories to choose from, which students really, really enjoy. And then her level and goal is listed here and in this upper corner. Her teacher can sign in to change story options or to do a cold timing or hot timing. And then, of course, at the end of each session, we want students to go ahead and log out. So Melissa wants to read the zebra story.
Zebras.
Ready?
And I say, yes, I'm ready.
Click each key word to learn the word and what it means.
All right, I'll click the first key word, and then I'll mute it so that I can tell you a little bit more about this page.
Pattern. A pattern is a set of things, like colors, shapes, lines, or sounds, that is repeated.
Okay, let me turn off the audio. Your students wouldn't do this because it's important for them to actually hear the narrator reading the definitions. And some students even like to read along with the narrator, but they are becoming familiar with words in the story that might be new to them or might have multiple meanings. So this is a nice piece of vocabulary work and even some comprehension work that the student can do as they're getting ready to read the story, because good readers kind of do things before they start reading, and then they think about the story, what it might be about, and then they do things during reading and after reading for comprehension to take place. So it's important for the students to pay attention to this. If you see them kind of staring off, you need to redirect them to really listen to these definitions. You also see here that we have the steps listed at the top, and when it turns dark blue, that means that's the step you're on, or that step has been completed. When you see this little red arrow, you know that's the step you're on. So let's get the sound back on here, and we see that the next button is now enabled. We also can see the requirements for this page using this star as well.
Look at the story title, keywords, and picture. Write a prediction about the story. Then, click Next to continue.
Okay, so some of your students might have a little trouble with keyboarding or writing, and so you can use any assistance that they would typically get if you need to scribe for them, if they need to orally do a prediction, if they need to write it in a different binder or something like that. But the computer program will only remember what is in this box. So if you want the students to do it in a different way, they have to at least, put something in the box to be able to go on to the next step. You could turn this step off. I don't necessarily recommend that, but it's possible to do. And sometimes teachers like the students to use a couple of the keywords in their prediction. That's completely up to you. But it's a nice way, again, to prep the student for reading the story.
Play Wordtastic while you wait for your teacher. Click the best answer to score points. Click on the words you don't know to hear them read to you.
Okay, so this is a synonym and antonym game that students can play while they're waiting for you. So they're not just waiting without reading or working on something valuable. But notice this red, this is the stop sign to say, please stop at my computer. I need a teacher to help me with conducting the cold timing. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And that's when the teacher can log in. And the teacher is sitting right next to the student at their computer. And they are going to conduct this cold timing so that we can get an accurate score.
Click Start Timing and begin reading. Click on the words you don't know to hear them read to you. Click Finished if you finish reading before the bell sounds.
Okay, I'm going to start the timing. The student, before the timer starts, the student can turn the reading guide on or off. A lot of students like it. It helps them keep their place. Some students don't, and they'd rather just use the mouse to follow along, or some students even use their finger to track across the page. So we have a whole story here, but for the cold timing, they're only reading for 1 minute. So it's really important that we know that, oh, they're just reading the story for 1 minute. It's not going to take a long time. They're not going to get frustrated because they know exactly what to do. And so it's important for us to know that the student is on task, actually reading the words. So we want them reading quietly out loud so that we can hear what they're saying, make sure that we're marking anything that's an error. Now for here, we don't have a numbers box to enter the errors. So that means that any word that's difficult for the student, they need to
Click on the last word you read when the bell sounded.
Just in the nick of time, I clicked on purposes as a difficult word, which underlined the word and counted it as an error. So the teacher is coaching the student to mark their errors.
Click Next to continue.
Okay, so I see I have a cold timing of 65. So that's my baseline score for this passage.
Look at how many words you read correctly per minute. Click Next to continue.
Okay, and so the student has a goal of 120. So through the read along and practice step, they're going to start improving that score until they reach their goal.
Click Start Read Along to read along, or click Next to continue.
Notice there are words in blue, and those are words that can be clicked for their definitions.
Exactly. Exactly means in every way. He did his work exactly as the teacher wanted, so he got a good grade on it.
All right, so those words are available for the student to click on. and they can click on any word that's difficult for them and hear it read. But
Most people know.
Click Start Read Along to read along again.
what I was just talking about was during the practice, they can do that. In the read along,
Most people know that zebras are wild horses with stripes and that they live in Africa.
Click Start Read Along to read along again.
so I keep canceling it because I want to talk to you guys about this. So the story is read from start to finish, and this one has 2 pages, only a little bit on the second page, with the narrator. So again, the student's job is to track and to sub-vocalize, to really whisper read along with this narrator the whole story. And I like students to do it 3 times. Some students might only need 2 or 1, but most of my students need 3 times to really learn these words in the story. Then we can click next.
Click Start Timing and begin reading.
Okay.
Click on the words you don't know to hear them read to you. Click Finished if you finish reading before the bell sounds.
Okay, that's what I meant earlier, that they would be able to, click on words that were difficult for them. And so this will go for 1 minute, and they'll get their practice scores over here. And once they are able to meet their goal, then students can click next. Right now, that next button is disabled because it's not time for the student to move on. First of all, they're in the middle of a timing. And second of all, they need to show that they can meet their goal before they can move on. Because towards the end of this process, the requirements for passing a story are that students can read the story at their goal rate, they can answer all the quiz questions correctly, and they can make sure that they are reading with a high level of accuracy with no more than 3 errors. So that's why this practice step is so important. And students might practice 3, 4, 5, even 6 or 7 times before they hit that goal. And that's purposeful. We want to stretch them a little bit. Remember, we want them to accelerate their reading progress. So it's important that this practice step is motivating.
Click on the last word you read when the bell sounded. You've reached your goal. You've finished all your practices. Click Start Timing to practice again, or click Next to continue.
All right, so if the student needs more practice, they can start timing again, but this student did quite well, and so she's going to move on.
Click the best answer, and then click Next.
Okay, so we've got a main idea question. Always the first question is main idea. The questions are presented in the same order each time so that you can analyze how your students are doing. And we'll just go through. I'll get one wrong so you can see what that happens then. So we've got happy sound when it's correct and a sad sound when it's not correct. All right, let's see. Answering these questions. And sometimes this is challenging for the students, and they might need to preview the questions ahead of time. You can print the story and the questions for the students, and they could even read the questions before they get started, so that they know what they're looking for when they're answering these questions. You see there was an open-ended question, and then there are some where they can choose from a
Serve.
and they can hear the words read.
Unique. Determine. Extinct.
And then we have some fill in the blank words to
Exactly.
fill in. And I've done this a few times.
Pattern.
Try to go as quickly as I can here.
Zoologists.
And they like the one about the rear halves. The kids giggle about that one. And
Extinct.
So we finished.
Retell or summarize the story in your own words.
All right. So
Click Review Story if you want to read the story again.
the students have access to the story for the comprehension questions and the retell. And so if they want to look back at the story, they can certainly do that. And then they can go back to the retell. Again, any accommodations you make for writing, you would make here as well.
Now you're ready to pass. Read the story and play Wordtastic until your teacher comes to pass you on this story.
Okay.
Click Start Timing.
So we're going to go ahead and log in as the teacher again. And I'll be wrapping up very quickly so that we can be sensitive to our time today. The teacher would, again, keep track of the question or of the errors that the student make. Also, the teacher is listening for some expression to see if the student is able to read the story and, pause for punctuation or raise their voice when it makes sense. And so, with a score of anything of 2, 3, or 4 on expression, the student can pass the story. So, again, we're looking for a high level of accuracy, meeting that goal rate, and reading with some expression. And that's how students pass the story. Once we get past this screen, there is a remedial options screen. If a student has not been able to be successful with a comprehension question, for example, you can have the student go back and just redo that one comprehension question, which is really nice because they don't have to do all of the questions again. They just have to fix the one that they missed. And then when you're looking at that pass and remedial actions,
Click on the last word you read when the bell sounded.
all right, we'll just say 2 errors and expression is a 2. And the student met their goal. It's very exciting. And I have to evaluate whether this question is correct, and I can look at the correct answer there. And then whether the retell meets my expectations. So the last thing I want to show you here is the way we can navigate through the different reports. We can see the fluency, comprehension. We can see what issue the student had with comprehension. The student had an issue with the detail question and the retell. And then Data Mentor is working in the background to use an algorithm to decide whether the student is in the right level with the right goal. And so this student is reviewing the student's initial placement because they're on the second story, and it doesn't have any recommendations or suggestions at this time. So the student is on track and doing just fine. So that is, in a nutshell, all the steps of Read Naturally Live. Let me come back to the PowerPoint as we finish out our session today. And I believe we hit every one of our targets here, which is good news. In your handout, you have a steps poster for Read Naturally Live that summarizes the steps. 2 of the differences with the phonics level is that instead of the prediction, there is a phonics lesson. Instead of keywords, there's a phonics lesson. And instead of a retell, there's a word list to practice for automaticity. And as we focus today on Read Naturally Live, please know that there are 3 other valuable programs within Read Live. And I really appreciate you being with us today. And we will make sure to answer any questions. If we don't do that live now, because we are at the end of our time, we will email you any answers to any questions that you might have.